Hey guys, you know I love to use a lot of crawfish lures, especially when I'm going for smallmouth bass. Well, I was kind of brainstorming, what can I do with a piece of peel and stick craft foam and a 1/4 ounce jig head. Hey guys, so here's what we're going to try to do, okay? I'm going to basically trace out a soft plastic crawfish lure onto some craft foam, cut it out, tie it onto a jig head. Okay, it's pretty cool. It's going to work. What I've actually done here, because I'm using a smaller 1/4 ounce jig head, I've actually taken one of my soft plastic craws. I've kind of cut it down a little bit to make it fit better for the length and profile with the size jig head that I'm going to use here. So what am I going to do? Again, it's just some standard department store craft foam. I'm going to take it, I'm going to use a Sharpie, and I'm going to trace it onto the foam. But then I'm going to fold it over to make it a little bit thicker, because this stuff's kind of thin. I'm going to fold it over and then cut out along the tracing. Cool thing with this is, you know, soft plastics are really cool, but your craft foam's going to float. So what's it going to do? At least in theory, I guess, right? It's going to take that jig head and it's going to be floating the profile vertically. Okay, did the video yesterday about using floating worm plastic to make a Ned rig, because what's cool about a Ned rig, the profile is vertical, so it bounces on the end of the jig head on the bottom. This is going to do the same thing. So let's take a look. We're going to take this off plastic, or you can freehand it if you want to, and we're going to trace it onto the foam, but I'm going to be making sure, since it's the stick-on foam, that I'll have enough room to fold it over before I cut it out. Okay, so I've simply just taken the soft plastic, I've laid it on the craft foam down on the bottom edge, and I'm simply going to trace it. In this case here, I'm just using like a silver Sharpie, because this stuff will show up on black. Doesn't have to be perfect, but basically, profile I'm trying to get is just some craws. You can experiment with this as you go, but I'm just going to simply trace it out. So I have the profile. It should work pretty well. Main thing is because you want to have those free-floating claws on it. There. Like such. So basically just traced it out on there. Alright? Just traced it out. I'm going to take it. I'm going to cut it across the bottom. Because here I'm using a full sheet. I don't need a full sheet on it, so I'm going to cut it across the bottom. Again, you know, it's how much you make of it on this. Doesn't have to be really stressful, and you know, doesn't have to be totally perfect on it. But I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna fold it over. So now again, it's gonna be twice as thick. It's gonna give me a little bit more, you know, material to play with, and make it flow a little bit better. So you just match up your edges. I folded it over, and now all I'm gonna do is cut it out. Let's see. So well this works. So, as you can see here, I've simply taken that foam, cut it out. Again, it's double layered here, so that's going to be the profile of your lure. Again, it similarly matches up to a lot of your craws. But again, I've cut it down. I mean, obviously, if you have a longer shank on your jig head on your hook, you can make this however big or small as you want to. But the concept here is because it's going to be, you know, floating with those, you know, the claws straight up from the bottom with the jig head down. So that's basically the cutout right there. Okay, so now I have my 1/4 ounce jig head. Again, you can play around with the different sizes on this depending on what kind of weight you want, how big of a jig head, how big of a hook, how big of a craw. You can do this with different types of lures too. But, you know, for purposes here, I've taken the jig head, I've taken a pair of pliers, I've kind of crimped down the barb on here on the lead, just so I don't have the rise part on there to hold soft plastics on typically. And just to help me out a little bit, I'm just going to take a little tiny dab of super glue on it, just to help me line this up. I'm going to take it up to the edge of the head, and that's going to make my profile. So there. Now all it is, I'm going to tie it off, and I'm not going to tie it off all the way to the curve of the hook itself. So now just a super glue there, it's just going to hold it in place a little bit. So really simple and easy trick here. So we just tied it off. To clean it up a little bit, I'm just going to put a little bit of clear nail polish on it. You can build it up all you want to too. Again, you can put feathers on it. You know, so you can play around with all sorts of different options. You know, bucktail, you name it. But for the basic purpose here of the lure, you're going to have basically like a stand-up foam craw. And you can use stand-up jig heads. You can do all sorts of stuff with it too. So experimentation, it's great. But in a nutshell, so you have a little stand-up craw. And all it is craft foam. Real cheap. Your local department store, Walmart, you name it. You can use tying tools if you want to. You can play around with it. You can just simply probably just glue the foam onto the jig head. And as you're working it, you're going to get some, you know, action in these claws on it. And let's see, we're going to test it out in a second. See if it stands up vertically on the bottom. Okay, there we go. Let's see if this thing floats vertically when it's on the bottom with a jig head in this container. There you go. Stand up. Works great. So as you can see, when you drop it in, it sits on the bottom just like this. So it's a cool little crawfish pattern, very similar to the Ned rig that, you know, we've talked about and is really popular. So you just take it, use that sticky craft foam, or I mean, heck, if you got a thicker piece of foam, you can make this out of just about anything. But you're going to drop it to the bottom, you're going to work it, and with current, your claws are going to be moving around. But again, here we go again. Drop it in, sits on the bottom upright, just like the defensive position of a crawfish on the bottom or a fish feeding on the bottom. So check it out, try it out. It's probably a pretty cool pattern, probably going to work well for you. I'm going to be using it a lot this year, just playing around. I'm probably going to put a lot more, you know, fur and hair and different types of things on it, probably color it in different ways too, but just wanted to experiment with it in this way with just some standard black sticky craft foam. So, as always, please subscribe to Fishyaker on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and we'll catch you on the water.
Fishyaker.com, the original kayak rigging video series.